how and why we do things, because we live in very interesting times right now, not just because of the political climate, but more so from a technological standpoint and the implications that some of these new technologies have. I want to talk about why we work on the problems that we work on and why we think they're so important for not only the people who are paying our bills, but society in a much broader standpoint. This is one of our main unifying concepts, and it's about this idea that story is how information has been transferred between humans for thousands of years. So we think that narrative is very important. The asterisk is that we don't quite know whether or not it's important for machines. And actually, I was talking with a DARPA program manager 2 days ago. They're looking at drone swarms, so 50, 100 drones and quadcopters and flying things. And if you have one person trying to control 100 things, it turns out that's not a very simple thing to do. So they're devising all these algorithms, and they're worried about command and control. And I trotted this out, and I said, you know, for any mission that you go on, there's a story behind that, and there's a story that you're trying to tell. So can you actually think about a drone swarm as a bunch of actors, and the person who's controlling the drones is the director, and he's working from a script. So it's actually a pretty powerful metaphor that he instantly got, and he's like, you've got to send me white papers, we want to throw money at you. We like that. Increasingly, the popular press is really focused on immersive technologies, and that's what I'm going to talk a lot about, because that's one of the reasons that we were stood up. The question mark is that we don't know how sticky immersion in and of itself does things. We do know that things like VR profoundly break linear narrative. So traditional storytelling models just flat out don't work in VR. I don't think they ever will, and I can get into philosophical arguments for those of you that disagree with me, because I love to be proved wrong, because I'm a scientist at heart. I used to be a chemistry professor in a previous life, but I've been doing new media since the mid-'70s, when I did computer-controlled slideshows and stuff when I was in high school and then right out of college. So we've been thinking about these things for quite some time. Again, I'm big on conceptual models. In chemistry, the conceptual models that you probably learned even in high school chemistry, if you want to sort of brave the depths of your brain to go back, apologies if your chemistry education scarred you for life. There are a lot of bad chemistry out there. But you had a model for the atom. You probably learned the Bohr model, which is you've got a nucleus and electrons rotate around it. Before that, there was the Rutherford model, which was kind of like pudding, like red pudding. You had positive and negative. And then you had quantum mechanics come along. Those are all conceptual models. That's not what an atom really looks like. But it's a way for us to understand how it works and why atoms behave the way they do, because then we can start to predict other behaviors and do interesting things. So I'm big on conceptual models. Technology breaks time and space, and it's been doing it for quite some time. The printing press took an oral tradition and turned it into something that was now durable. It wasn't just what was said and then I had to remember it. I could read it over and over again, and it was portable. It could be transported more cheaply than stone tablets coming off of a mountaintop. Then, in the 20th century, you had two main mediums come online. First was radio and then television. Those completely changed every aspect of society. I get reporters asking me pretty much on a daily basis, what parts of the business world are AR and VR going to touch? The answer is all of them. It will change every aspect of every piece of your life in one way or another. You may not have direct contact with it, but indirectly you probably will be touched. By the way, the Betamax was made up until December of last year, and I just saw that the last VHS VCR was made this month. No more. So all those VHS tapes, you better convert them to digital. You're not going to have anything to play them on. The 21st century, and I slide back to 1995 to include that, was the beginning of digital. And digital changed everything in ways that we still haven't quite figured out yet and that we're still sorting through. So you can make the argument that all of this stuff is just going to be situation normal, we'll figure it out. A little bit later I'm going to show you a slide that should give you some information as to why digital is different than analog and why the 21st century is going to be different with regards to technology uptake than the 20th century is. So we've got all of this stuff. Is this what our world is going to be like? This was actually a commercial for a Swedish telecom company. I gave a talk at Chiat Day Advertising Agency and met the guy in the blue hat. And I showed this video, and he came up to me after the talk, and he said, that was me in that, which was an interesting kismet. That's why I always credit who did this. So this is what the person sees. And all they've done is a third of a second visual delay. So right now the VR is the darling of the popular press, and it's the darling of a lot of industry, but is this what our future is? Kind of hints at what our dystopian AR future might look like. So I highly recommend watching the rest of this video. It's actually a pretty good cautionary tale. But is that the world that we're heading towards? And actually, I would argue if the commercial sector has their way, it's exactly what it'll be. Because you can see it's a great way to push ads. And you can't get away from them because they're persistent and they're based on where you are. They're contextually accurate. Digital has some great elements to it. Why is it great? It scales. So I can serve an infinite number of people if I've got enough server resources. And instead of one person having a conversation now, I can clone that and I can put it anywhere and have it available 24/7. You can have stuff on your phone, you can have it in the cloud, it can go anywhere and follow you. And then it's very easy to change and modify and tweak things. So what's the downside to digital? Well, it's infinitely scalable, which means that everybody expects everything 24/7 and with 99.99% uptime. It's highly portable, so your data can get off and walk away without you, or your data can be taken from you without you even knowing that it was there. My healthcare records are in the hands of people on the black market. Take your pick, either from Anthem, Blue Cross, or from the government's Office of Personnel Management. Both of them were hacked and both of them had my private information, which is now no longer private. So Photoshop is a verb. After Effects is becoming a verb. Anybody can use video software and make it generate whatever they want from whatever viewpoint they want. Documentary filmmakers know that there's no such thing as documentary film, actually. Every film is biased. Every camera angle imparts bias. One of the problems that we have now, you've got people doing cell phone videos, and now that's the new evidence. The problem is people don't realize that camera angle biases. And if you see a 30-second clip, if you don't know what happened 30 seconds before, or 30 seconds after, or from a different viewpoint, you really don't have good situational awareness on what actually happened. Digital gives the user a vote. This is the biggest problem with VR, and this is why I argue that linear narrative won't work in VR. The user gets to choose where to look. So you can try and trick them and force them into look in certain places, but in that case, then just put them in a regular screen. The first two are gone. The third one is ubiquitous. Get used to it. It's not going away. This one's problematic, and we haven't figured out what it really means yet. But the day that I can create a digital representation of a world leader and make them say anything I want to, evidence no longer exists. And we can actually do that. We have high-resolution scans of Obama, and the data's tucked away somewhere. So all of this stuff is either today or not far off. And of course, AI is going to destroy the entire world. It's funny because 5-10 years ago, AI was a bad joke. Everybody made fun of Siri. Now it's going to lead to the end of Western civilization. So a little from column A, a little from column B. Technology in and of itself is agnostic. It's what you do with the technology and how you employ it. So what do we do here? In 1999, the Army looked to the West, because most of the Army is back on the East Coast or in the middle of the country, saw that Hollywood was very good at getting people to take $15 out of their wallet and go sit in a dark room for 2 hours. The way they do it is through story. So the Army has a lot of very hard training problems. Their easiest training problems are training someone how to drive a Humvee. Their hardest training problems are training a 19-year-old kid out of high school how to have a culturally sensitive conversation with a village elder in Afghanistan. That's exactly what we ask our young men and women to do. So how do you train those ill-defined domains, those soft skills like leadership, cultural sensitivity, decision-making? Can we bring Hollywood expertise and academia together to work on those problems? And that's why ICT was created in '99. That's why we're still stood up. The Army faces every problem that society faces. They usually face it earlier, and they face it under more dire circumstances. So they're solving the exact same problems that the rest of society is doing. This is our official mission statement. I've highlighted the two important words. We're interested in immersive and we're interested in humans. We don't care about technology for the sake of technology. That's what engineers do. God love engineers, because somebody's got to build the stuff. But if you take the human out of the equation, then all you've got is a shiny object that doesn't necessarily get you a positive outcome. We do basic research, we do applied research, and we build advanced prototypes. We work in 5 main areas. You can slice and dice this any way you want. We do a lot of work in immersion. So the lab can point towards how many people have seen or used a cardboard viewer, Google Cardboard Viewer. So our lab did one of those in 2012 and presented it at the IEEE VR conference. When was Google Cardboard invented by Google? 2014, 2 years later. So we were 2 years ahead. We try to stay 3 to 5 years ahead in what we're doing. Mark Bolus, who ran our mixed reality lab, he's now on sabbatical up at Microsoft Research. He's going to try and fix HoloLens. He had a young kid by the name of Palmer Luckey come in and ask to be a lab technician. Palmer Luckey then worked in our lab, worked on a lot of Frankenviewers like that, and then did a Kickstarter for Oculus, got $2.5 million in his Kickstarter, and then was bought by Oculus, or by Facebook for $2 billion. Because we're a bunch of stupid academics who publish things and give it away, we didn't get a piece of the $2 billion pie. But that's part of why academia should exist. We do a lot of high-resolution facial scanning. The lab has pioneered techniques around that. A lot of the data has ended up in most of the major motion pictures that you've seen. We build virtual humans. You'll see some of those. They run on phones. They run in the cloud. They run in full-size instantiations. Some of them are quite smart. Some of them are not so smart. Sometimes we need to simulate more than one hurt human, so we do population, social simulation. And then finally, since we're mostly in the training business, although training and operations are all starting to mix, we have to be able to assess what we're doing. If we can't prove that what we're using is better than the previous way, then there's no reason for them to use. Self-facilitates that, but it's a new medium. What works on a television set doesn't work on a phone. It's a new way of doing things. Number 3 is immersive. AR and VR are very different relationships that you as a human have with your information. New mediums, when we get new mediums, what we do is we take old models and then we shove them into the new medium and they suck. So, first television comes along, they did radio plays. And then it turns out that people like me had a face just made for radio, right? Because there were a lot of radio stars that didn't make the transition because visually they didn't cut it. The problem that I have with VR right now is a lot of people are trying to shove movies and linear narrative into VR, and to me, it's kind of like, why would you're throwing away the power of VR, which is the ability of user agency. So if you're going to do that, it's kind of like doing a TV broadcast and just doing sound, doing a radio play over TV with no pictures. Use the medium for what it's good for. We don't know what these mediums are good for yet. This is a disruptive innovation. It's not sustaining. It's not just another screen. I've had arguments with people about that. They say, well, it's just another screen that's 2 inches in front of your eyes. No, it's a very different relationship with information and with interaction that we haven't figured out yet. And I would argue that we're still in this phase. We're not even to the early adopter phase. We're still really figuring this out. What's different? This is technology penetration for different technologies, so up to 91% of the population having it. This is how long somebody lived during average lifespan for those things. And then you look at the beginning of the 20th century, stove, electricity, car. You look at the slopes of these lines, and it took a while for everyone in society to have those. If you look over here, look how steep these lines are. That means that we are adopting technology at orders of magnitude faster rates than we did before. What wrong could happen when you start using things before you fully understand them? Well, you could walk off the cliff while you're playing Pokemon Go and die. Or walk off the cliff while you're staring at your Facebook feed on your phone and die, which happened down in San Diego about 6 months ago. So all of these things, because we haven't had time to process these, and humans take time, are messing with us. No one is a multitasker. You're a serial monotasker. My son, who's 19, is a very good serial monotasker. He's able to divert attention very quickly between 3 games that he's playing and his phone and anything else that's going on. But humans have a very tough time making sense out of multiple screens. We're not digits. And so this is where, for me, the huge digital divide really lies. That humans are analog, we're real time, we're continuous, and digital is a bunch of zeros and ones. So I can think of them as oil and water, or from my chemistry background, the best you can do is form an emulsion, because these 2 liquids don't form a solution. Analog, humans, and digital don't mix. But there are emulsions that work for you. So if you take oil and vinegar and you bring it together in the right combinations, you get a tasty salad dressing. But it requires agitation. What happens if you take oil and vinegar, shake it up, and then you let it sit? It's not an interactive crowd, is it? It separates. It's an emulsion, it's not a solution. What happens if you add egg yolk to oil and vinegar? Vinegar. You didn't know this was going to be a cooking class, did you? Oil and vinegar plus egg yolk gives you, this is a stable emulsion. This doesn't separate. So the reason I think of humans and digital as oil and vinegar is, if I'm looking at my phone and I see my Twitter stream and I see my Facebook feed, my email, now I'm shaking that up. The digital that's in here and the human is being shaken. The minute I put it in my phone and it goes away and I've got notifications turned off, it separates. Digital's not part of my life. It's separate from me. So I go through my life right now looking for egg yolk. I'm trying to figure out how to build stable emulsion so that humans can interact with digital environments and make it stable and make it useful. The reason it works from a chemistry standpoint is that these emulsifiers are a little bit like one and a little bit like the other, and they help to bridge the 2. I think that story is one of the egg yolks. Story can be that binding element, and so I like to think about emulsional realities. Forget augmented and virtual. Those are mixed realities anyway, because humans are involved. So it's all mixed reality. I like to think about this because now I've got a conceptual model I can play with. So I'm looking for binding agents. How do I bind humans to this digital information? Because at the end of the day, the technology is supposed to serve you. You're not supposed to be serving the technology. And the danger is the more black boxes we get and the more things that we don't understand, the more we're put at the mercy of the technology or the people who control the technology. Not that I'm paranoid and have a tinfoil hat, but I do line my motorcycle helmet with tinfoil. So it really is about the humans. If you take the human out and you just focus on the technology, all you get is technology. If you take the human out and you just focus on the human, you ignore the fact that technology touches every aspect of your life right now. Your banking, your communication is all digitally mediated. You have no choice. So you've already, whether or not you signed on the dotted line, you've signed on the dotted line. You are part of the digital ecosystem. So it behooves you to understand that relationship, and that's part of why we exist, is to understand how we can make that better, because what we want to do is use the technology for good, not to just sell you another product. That's all I got.
Okay, go ahead.
Did you have a happy childhood?
Well, we were from a middle-class family, and we lived in the center of Łódź, which wasn't a small town. It was the second largest city in Poland. And I personally, except occasionally having had my payas pulled and somebody would shout, the Židi, the Palestinian, Jews go to Palestine, I never experienced any anti-Semitism as such in Łódź. I had a very happy childhood. My parents were winemakers. My father started teaching me to become a winemaker when I was 3.5 years old. I started school when I was 3.5 years old. And by the age of 5, I knew the Old Testament almost off by heart. And I could already read and I could already write, because my mother went to gymnasium. She actually taught me how to read Polish. So I spoke Polish to my father, Polish to my mother, Yiddish to my father, and I became bilingual almost from birth.
What happened when the war broke out?
Well, life changed to such an extent because after the Nazis occupied Łódź, which was within 6 to 7 days of the army coming through, the German army, and the war was still going on. My grandfather, who was a president, what you would call a president of a seminary, and he was on one of the lists in the Jewish community, the Nazi security services started rounding up people on lists which they had. And they came to arrest my grandfather, who was 78 years old, and he was actually lying in bed. He was recovering from a kidney stone operation. Nobody was working because the war was still on. My father was at home. We were all at home. And by that time, my grandparents had already
Been things that people have asked him in conversation, and these are linked to what responses might be good for them. It's a many-to-many linking. And when he hears a new response, a new question like what you guys asked, something he has never heard before, he uses this big amount of linked data between questions and responses to kind of guess what should appear in the response. And then he looks through his list, or the system looks through the list of videos and says, okay, this is the closest match to the question I just heard. And then the system plays that video. Now sometimes you can ask him a question, it didn't happen here, but sometimes you can ask him a question where he doesn't have a good answer, the system will realize that as well. It'll say, I don't have a good match. And it will, therefore, it'll select something like, could you please repeat that? I don't want to answer the question. Why don't you ask me about something else? So it knows, do I have a good match in my list of clips where I can play that, and or do I not have? And then I use another conversational behavior to keep the conversation going. So the process will always be appropriate. It sometimes makes mistakes. We didn't see a mistake today, thankfully, but sometimes. And the key to making this work in a conversation with people is knowing what to expect. So even though we never heard the two questions that came from the audience, or never heard them phrased exactly like that, we know that people like to ask them about liberation, even if they don't use the phrase liberation. We know that people want to ask him about his life in the camps, even if they phrase it a little bit differently than the question was asked here. So if we collect a lot of questions from the audience, from users, then we will, if we collect a lot of questions from users, answers and feed them into the into the system, then we will able to also look at new questions and use the links and similarities between them to find an appropriate response to something he's never heard before. So that's, and so when do I need to stop? Pretty much now. So very quickly, if there's any questions that, yeah?
The 1,700 videos that you have, the semantic mapping of those are, adding sort of meaning to those. Is that done with machine learning, or does someone by hand have to go through and say, this is attached deliberation, this is good for this?
So we don't code them. We code them directly with the questions. So we don't have a specific categorization of the context. We do for other reasons. But the main classifier, the way it works, is it directly learns from the links between the question text and the response text.
Okay, so
But the linking is done manually.
So does speech recognition on the video as well to understand what's in the video?
No,
And then
no, the
no?
videos are manually transcribed.
The manual.
Yeah. There was another question from here earlier, right, Paulson?
No, I think explain what.
Okay. Yeah.
So you said there was occasionally have this statement is matches. So you revise this by automatically or
Out in outer space, but they had to look like they did, like they were. And in order to do that, you might know it's very important to get the lighting exactly right on the face or on the body, anywhere lighting in the scene, to composite it so that it's very realistic. It's the first giveaway in a bad movie. You can see or bad visual effects if the lighting isn't matching. So we set up light probes, and basically we can capture the environment of any scene, whether it be an on-set scene or in the sorry about that, in a park, in a cathedral, in a courtyard. It doesn't matter, and then we can synthetically reproduce that and program that same lighting environment into the light stage, so that when you have a performer or a subject in the light stage and you take a photograph of that person or you take some footage of that person, you can then take them out of that scene and put them directly into whatever environment that you just create that you want to. So it could be in the space station scene, for example. So in the movie they had, they called it a light box. It was just very large, dense LED panels that they had a dynamic scene of the light of the moon and the space station, so that when Sandra Bullock and George Clooney were acting in that light box, they had that scene reflected on their face, so that when they were composited out and put into that environment, they matched the scene perfectly. So that's kind of what we do here. So does anybody want to check it out and go inside? Okay. Let me give you a
Wild West Cowboy Saloon. This is Gunslinger. It's a little different than a lot of the projects we work on. We do a lot of stuff we do is in the defense space, it's in the therapeutic or evaluative space, working with psychotherapists or post-traumatic stress clinicians, a lot of stuff with veterans, with the Navy and the Army, and occasionally stuff that's 1891 and Western themed. The idea here is that Gunslinger is a demonstration of the integration and storytelling capabilities of the ICT. But that's not just for showing off. We did it for internal development. A lot of projects, maybe they're the Army coming to us and saying, hey, in about 2 years, we would like to be able to deploy a system that's on a certain piece of hardware teaching this field manual, this 4-week course, and everything on this website. Can you make that? And the researchers, the prototype teams, the product teams can say, to the DoD, absolutely, we can make this happen. We don't want them to then spend 6 months going, well, it's been 6 months and now we have the left arm moving, we're going to work on the right arm. We don't want that. We want people to start with the capability of, you need a virtual human, you need an interactive tutorial system, you need a back end, you need a brain, you need a server, whatever you need. We can provide those capabilities internally. So the group I'm a part of, Integrated Virtual Humans, we do a lot of that back end work, a lot of the integration, the development, the tools, onboarding. We use, say, whether it's a license-based technology like Unity, the game engine that's running this, or something's developed in-house, like Smart Body, the animation system, we want to be able to say to project teams, hey, what do you want to make? Oh, yeah, just check it out at SBN, you're ready to go. So they can get their projects set up and get them running in hours or days instead of weeks or months. Because when it's the taxpayers paying for it, we sort of like to respect that. So we went a little different story-wise. A lot of our projects when this started were Iraq and Afghanistan, inside the Department of Navy ship, stuck in some nondescript army post somewhere in a really bland office. So we decided to go with the Wild West because one, nobody knows what it actually looked like, so we could do the movie version. And two, it lets us tell a lot of interesting stories without having to be 100% accurate or historic or risk offending anybody unless, you know, you're with the black-hatted cow rustler types. So Gunslinger is about an 8 to 10 minute mixed reality virtual human experience. It's a lot of buzzwords, but what it actually means, it's like, think of it like an interactive short film where we control everything except the main character. I will play the ranger, since I'm a little short on hats, and I used that joke already today, so I should get a new one. We'll head inside, we'll talk to the system for a couple minutes, I'll sort of take the lead on that, and then we'll jump around and maybe look at a little more of the story. The only thing you need to know is that we're going to a town called Kalima. There's a guy named Rio. He's very bad. All right, if you go ahead and follow me, just watch your step here and here. We're going to head inside. The system's in a holding pattern, so we all get inside. We're going to be looking mostly this way. We'll talk to them for a while. Feel free to pull up the seat. You won't be blocking anything. Everybody. Don't worry. There you've got the emphasis in putting on. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to skip a little bit of exposition and come in. The system detects when a ranger enters because of magic. Yeah, that's it. We'll skip to where they see us.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Looking for someone, or you just passing through?
Just passing through.
Just passing through, huh? Well, that's probably a good thing. I don't want to do that post haste.
Why's that?
Well, I don't want no trouble in my bar, Ranger, but a lot of people wouldn't mind seeing Rio Lane go west, preferably all horizontal like, if you catch my drift.
Wait, who's Rio?
We shouldn't talk about Rio.
He doesn't like it.
Coming
I don't
in any
think so.
minute now.
What's your name?
My name is Utah.
Great, Utah. Can I get a whiskey?
Or help yourself to any drink you want. We'll settle up before you leave.
How long have you been here?
Long enough to get it when I didn't.
Harmony, do you know Rio?
We will be here soon, Ranger.
Rio's coming here.
Rio never misses his 5 o'clock meeting. He'll be here soon.
Why are you scared of Rio?
Rio is the reason Kalima is a ghost town.
5
Either
o'clock.
scares people away or he kills them.
What time is it now?
It's almost 5 o'clock.
How do you know what time it is?
It's almost 5. The clock is right behind you there, above the door.
That's a good point. How's that weather?
Quiet, Harley. He's a coming. Yes, quiet, Harley. He's a coming.
No, he's here.
Finger, you rotten Malapago. Where's my money?
Si, senor. Pero my daughter, she is sick.
Oh, I like when a man begs to die. Utah,
Yes, Mr. Lane?
congratulations on your retirement.
What do you mean? I'm not retiring.
Well, you better start, because I'm taking over your business. Load your corn juice and cash onto the wagon. Now. And who might you be?
Put your gun down.
What makes you think I care?
No, just put the gun away.
You sound exactly like all the rangers that came before you. Maybe I should send you where I sent them.
Rio, I'm going to shoot you.
You and what army?
You know what? Maybe I got off on the wrong foot with all this tough talk. Can I buy you a drink?
Doesn't that make you special?
My mom thinks I'm special.
Shut up, you idiot.
Pedro's dead.
Well, of course he is. I shot him. That sod farmer's finally one with the dirt. Hell, his dying words should have been, thank you, Rio.
He left behind his wife and daughters.
Get packed, Harmony. We're going to Wichita. This town is ghosting and I'm not dying with it.
Please, Rio. How about San Francisco? I could get a job singing.
You talking back to me? Get packed.
No, you get packed.
Don't interrupt me, city boy.
But I like interrupting you, Rio.
Quiet, you idiot.
Oh,
Get
see,
packed.
I don't appreciate you calling me an idiot. That's really not the kind of language I would use. Try I statements like, you think I'm an idiot. Thankfully, I have the tablet that runs the whole thing, so he does whatever I tell him to, including deposing him when he came temporarily. He'll be back. So the whole idea behind Gunslinger, as you saw, is it brings people in so they can interact with these characters inside sort of a story space. It doesn't need to be perfectly accurate. This is not the Wild West. This is a movie version of 1891. But we can get away with it because if you've ever seen a Western, this feels familiar. We cribbed the decor of the bar, the style of the characters, a lot of the dialogue and the style, the words, the vocabulary from Westerns. Though not quite enough sometimes. People who haven't seen Westerns always get a little weird. But we've designed the system so that when you come in, it's looking for specific lines, but if it doesn't recognize them, it'll just open up the conversation. 90-some-odd% of the time, people always ask the same couple of things. And that's how Gunslinger really became effective. We spent a lot of time prototyping it and testing it, putting interns through, students, random people we grabbed off the street, friends and family, whoever we could get, to try out different iterations of the story. We prototyped using text-to-speech instead of, before we brought the actors in and never refined the script. The whole idea being we wanted to try something, you know, when it was cheap or free, because we know that other projects may not be using actors, they may just be using text-to-speech, or they may want to record once. They may not have the time to iterate. We want them to be able to try something today. If you want to try something out, it's hooked up, it's ready to go. Because Gunslinger, the goal in itself was to try some fun stuff and do some cool things. But deep down, what we needed to do was provide value to the Institute. The university paid for this, not the government. And so the university wanted to see a return. I have to answer to Randy Hill, the executive director of the ICT, with, okay, you spent the money, you built Wild West Cowboy Saloon, why? And that's why we did all this technology integration. The game engine, Unity, we brought it into the Institute, the group I'm a part of, for Gunslinger, to try it out when we were evaluating other engines. We integrated it with the smart body animation system I mentioned earlier, and with the vision system overhead that tracks wherever you are with the hat. It can see the gun as well. The whole idea being, if other groups want that capability, they can just pull the code out of our repository. Also that they can save time and save money. As to the story side, we looked at some of the research that came out of how people interact with virtual humans. Dr. John Gratch's group next door, they spent a lot of time looking at what makes a good virtual human. They listen, they look at you, they know the answers to your questions, or in the case of Rio, they do none of that. He's a bad virtual human. He doesn't listen, he doesn't look at you when you interrupt him, he yells at you, and sometimes he'll decide you've interrupted him even if you didn't say anything. All these things that drive people crazy, but make him a good bad guy. He's just a total jerk. He's a lot of fun to work on though. His character actually, there's about 750 lines of dialogue in the whole system. He has about 50. But that's one of the other tricks, is that he doesn't have a lot to say, it's just all generic evil cowboy language. But the other 700 lines, that's not enough to get through adult conversation in English. You get about 20, 30 seconds with 700 lines of dialogue, and then you get a question you don't know the answer to. But that's also part of where the storytelling comes in. It's the Wild West. People say, hey, did you see that speech last night? No, it's 1891. It's actually a specific day. I have it written down somewhere. Do you want to talk about the weather? It's raining. It's always raining. And it just stopped raining right when you came in. And the rain comes in and out. Excuse me. To cue people when we're in a sort of a cutscene portion of the system without it being super aware. Like we don't put up a don't talk type thing. Though we do turn off the microphone sometimes depending on how people get. That's the whole thing, is we want people to feel like they're interacting without those constraints. You can come in, you can do whatever you want. It works better the more you do it like the way we envisioned or practice, or the way a bunch of other people have done it. But you can come in and just start putting bullets in the ceiling, like, that's fine, whatever, go ahead. You'll have a very different time than if you come in and just do nothing. In fact, the system will move on without you, and the only time we ever actually really pull an interaction is a specific story point. Because we want the characters trying to engage you, but if you're like, nope, not going to talk, fine. We don't put you on rails. We don't put you in a box. We don't say pick one of these three choices. That's not the goal of this. This is a storytelling and interaction system. It's not for specific training. It's not to get a specific point across. It's for you to just try it out and see where it's going. I can go on so long on this project. I've been on it since almost the beginning. Any questions so far? In the back.
Are you going to kill Leo?
Oh, maybe. Sometimes. We'll see if I'm fast enough, though I think I might have accidentally turned him off. Let me just go ahead and check the log and see what everyone says about. Any other non-murdering Rio-themed questions? Don't want to spoil any surprises. What makes you think it'll be a gunfight? Because there's always be a gunfight.
First, I'm listening.
The ranger here is planning on bushwhacking you.
That right.
Knows you like to drink and thinks after you have a
Hear me
few,
out.
well, it's gonna be simple to blow a hole in your back and kill you dead.
Sounds like you're calling me out, Ranger. Guess I'll have to defend myself. Besides, I thought I told you to get the hell out of Kamima.
True, but...
You did it! You did it, Ranger!
Oh, you son.
Ranger, you're gonna be a legend.
Ah, yeah, she's gonna start. The good ending. The good ending never comes up, so actually, it's kind of underdeveloped. That's actually the good ending of if you take him on alone. Nobody can do that because I'm cheating viciously. Because as I said, it's all controlled from the tablet. I mentioned earlier that we're tracking the gun and the hat via a 2D infrared tracking system that relies on these retroreflective markers. Or I should show the markers. They're great. They're lovely. They work fantastic when there is one person in the saloon. That's why we've moved away from those types of passive infrared systems. With active infrared tracking, you can do 3D.
We're winding up, we're done.
Ah, well then, I will cut ahead. Any questions? If so, email me, jmore@ict.usc.edu, or tell Maggie, or tweet at us at USCICT, I think there's underscore. Any other questions about Gunslinger, send us a mail, come on by. We do personalized demos occasionally, depending on whether the projector's on fire. And thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Bye.